Hello, 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 and welcome to Coffee with the Carter Man. I'm Carter Clues. Grab your beverage. As old Andy Griffith used to say on the Andy Griffith Show, that is good. Good. And show us our show today. We have great variety. Everybody knows rules. We start off with the potpourri, about 10 minutes of my views on the news, okay? And I think a lot of you are going to agree with what I have to say. I have some important items today. We're going to get an update on the mainstream media death watch. It's just wonderful. And then we're going to, on a much more serious note, talk about the Oreshnik game changer because, folks, this is this is serious. It is much more serious, unfortunately, than the Biden administration is taking it. But we'll get to that. Then we have our expert interview, and today's interview is with a gentleman who, I'm going to tell you this, he truly defines an officer and a gentleman. Okay, and an astute political analyst just across the board, a best-selling author over and over again. Matter of fact, has a new book out now. I'm sure we'll talk about it, all right, because it's an important topic. Lawfare, essentially lawfare, okay? So when we go to him, you're gonna say, thank God you have him on, Carter. You should have let him talk more. So that's our interview. Then we finish up with predictions, all right? I have a prediction today. When we get to mine, I have a prediction today that some of you are not going to like. Not going to like. I discussed it. Matter of fact, with Bill Wilson. Remember we interviewed Bill, America's #1 political strategist, analyst. When I talked to Bill the other day, he didn't agree with me. Okay. We'll see what you think. We'll see what you think. And now let's get to the show. Let's get to the potpourri. Let's get to the potpourri. Always kind of excited. Let me push my time button because we only allow about 10 minutes for this, okay? Otherwise, I'll blab on forever. Number one, the mainstream media death watch. The mainstream, remember that graphic from last week? Okay. Folks, remember from my very first Coffee with the Carter Man, I told you if Trump wins the election, the mainstream media is dead. He won, and you can see him kind of like just turning to dust in front of our eyes. And I love every second of it. Glenn Greenwald, those of you who know him know he's a very astute analyst himself. He just did a piece where he said, look at the figures. I'm going to leave it up there a second, okay? Look at the figures of the mainstream media from Adweek, okay? These are recent. Look at the numbers of viewers they're pulling in, okay? As Glenn said, their primetime shows can't even get 75,000 people. They're primetime. Folks, there are 140 million people in the country. They can't get 75,000. I love these figures. And it's not just MSNBC, which is gone. It's dead. Elon's going to buy it, get rid of everybody on it, make them suffer on the way out the door. Jake Tapper's total pulls 110,000. Jake the Snake. Wolf Blitzer, who, by the way, I'm sorry, but when you watch Wolf Blitzer, he always has a look on his face. He's old, and he always has that look on his face. All right, some of you are not going to like this, but he, honest to God, does always look like he's trying not to pass gas. I mean, think about it. Think about the look Wolf has on his face. Well, old Wolf draws 72,000 people in a nation of 340 million, okay? Okay, all the rest of them are just as bad. They're awful. They're terrible people with a terrible pull. Just to give you some idea, by comparison, Joe Rogan podcast, 2 million. Tucker Carlson, 1 million. Megyn Kelly, 500,000. I think she's fantastic now. Had that one weirdo crazy, chopped her hair off a while back to look like Rachel Maddow. She came out of it, and now she's better than ever. Redacted, 400,000. And the figures, by the way, are for the real main target audience of the networks, which is the 18 to 54 group. In other words, they don't want me watching at all. It's just fine because I don't watch. So why? Let's bring it up to date. Why? Well, how about Kristen Welker here? Kristen Welker. How about this? Kristen Welker. I'm sorry. That's Joan Crawford from the movie Straight Jacket. Here's Kristen Welker. Look at the look in the eyes every time she interviews a conservative. There is, let me get it right, Joan Kristen. Joan Kristen. Crazoids. That's why they're dying. They killed themselves by savaging conservatives. And of course, my favorite, as you all know, who I can't wait to see her walk out the door empty handed, Caitlin Collins. Oh, I'm sorry. That's Ilsa Koch, the butcher of Buchenwald. There is Caitlin with the exact same countenance, which she uses every time she interviews a conservative. Once again, see, remember that countenance? There we go. Look familiar. Same mentality. Trust me, Caitlin would love to put you into the concentration camps if she could. That's the kind of people they are. And that's the problem. Totally out of touch with the American people. The American people went MAGA on election day. They told Caitlin and Kirsten, whatever the heck her name is, Dana Nash. Let's see. Why does she go by Nash when she was born Schwartz? She actually most recently was married to John King, but she keeps the Nash name from the husband of 10 years ago because she's a CIA operative. He is one of the most vile CIA agents in the world. He signed the 51 name letter that lied about Donald Trump and the laptop, the Hunter laptop. She gets her notes from him. Here's the notes. Read them. And then she's always vile toward conservatives. The mainstream media is out of touch. Everything is going to podcast. I urge you, I plead with you, don't watch any of the mainstream media. None of them. Look, the days are over. And look, I don't want to run out of time. The days are over when you wanted to watch somebody who talked down to you, talked down at you, and said like this. Well, today in the news, we had when you can just watch people like Patrick Bet-David, who talks with you instead of at you, and actually allows you to reply in their discussion forums, which we're going to start having soon. Because I know you'll have a lot to say, because I get your messages, clclues@gmail.com. I got to finish up here on this segment because I want to get to the next segment. My favorite picture right now of a mainstream media, Rachel Maddow crying on air because Elon might buy it and I'm done getting my $25 million a year. And look at the nasty thing he put up on Twitter. Okay. And I'm not showing the whole picture because it was a little vulgar. It showed the woman from the waist down as well. And Elon's going to buy it, and she is going to weep and whine all the way out the door. Okay, which I can't wait to see. Remember the Henry Kine quote I showed you last week? I know it's vicious. Bear with me. He said, of course, we're going to forgive our enemies after we hang them. Okay, so there you go. Now, on to a more serious note, much less fun. Folks, this latest crisis in the Ukraine with Putin firing that Oresnik missile, it's serious. Biden has brought us right to the brink of nuclear war. And as John Kennedy said, here we go. Let me show you this video. Thanks for bringing that up, Gary.
If he takes that action, there really is nothing we can do. So it makes no sense to wonder if he's bluffing or not. And let's don't keep going down a path that could lead to an escalation of the war.
But does that amount to appeasement of an international bully?
No, absolutely not. And I hear that all the time. It really gets my blood boiling because, again, that implies you can't appease him, that implies that there's an alternative, that you can say, we're going to ignore what he said and we're going to keep doing what we want and there won't be a negative consequence. When you're talking about the possibility of nuclear war, you have to respect the nuclear weapons as he has to respect our nuclear weapons. And our objective is to prevent this from going to nuclear war, not find out where Putin's red line actually is. And since there is no
Good. That's it, folks. That Dan Davis, very smart guy, deep dive, good alternative media podcast to watch. And the gentleman we're going to have on later, I'm sure knows Dan, and he is an expert way up there at that level. But notice the reason I showed you the video, notice the explosion after explosion. Well, please don't think that was a whole bunch of missiles Putin fired. It wasn't. Biden decided on his way out the doors, he stumbles and fumbles and mumbles his way out the door. Biden did this to Putin, okay? Biden did this to Putin. You all remember that Steve Martin from The Man with Two Brains? We have the man with no brain. So he decided, I'm going to do this to Putin. I'll teach him, just like I did corn pone at the swimming pool. You remember that absurd story? And what we got back was a weapon. A weapon. I want to make sure you understand this. Look, here's a guy to watch, okay? Millennium 7, okay? See what he says there? Not a real attractive guy and very, very solemn. I can tell you, I watched this whole half-hour podcast, but he has some expertise on weaponry, I'll tell you that. So check it out, Millennium 7. Let me give you a little bit about what he said about this weapon. This is a game changer. I watched Larry Johnson being interviewed by Napolitano just before I came on. And he said, folks, this is what we did in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It's that big of a game changer. Okay? Except here's one of the differences. Those two bombs were it. That was our nuclear arsenal. The Oresnik that was just fired and destroyed that munitions plant 30 stories down. That's only one of 10 they have now. And they're making more and more every day. This gentleman put it in perspective for us. This hypersonic ballistic missile. Now listen to this. I really want you to listen to this because it's damn important, okay? All right. This is a weapon that had 6 warheads equipped with 6 submunitions. So we're talking about 36 explosions. It didn't have an arm warhead on it because just the kinetic energy when it hit caused everything you just saw, okay? 5 times this. When I say the kinetic energy, well, it goes 8,450 miles, Mach 11, and that's 5 times the speed of sound. And as Putin said, look, I'm going to quote it. I'm not, don't say, well, he's like Tulsi, like the Russian, like the American left does. Tulsi's she's a Russian agent. Now, I'm not a Russian agent. But I'm telling you, Putin later on, he gave 30 minutes warning before he fired it. Why? Because as he said, modern air defenses cannot intercept such missiles. That's impossible. That's what Joe Biden has now triggered. Didn't I say it was damn important? That's what this man now triggered with his sheer on the way out the door idiocy to ensure that Trump could not arrive at peace, okay? And then you have Trump appoints a new advisor who, instead of standing up and saying, look, we want a settlement there, we want to bring this to an end, he goes on Fox and ready for this? This is Michael Waltz, Trump's new advisor on international warfare. I talked to Jake Sullivan. We're hand in hand. We're one team. Jake, the idiot Sullivan. Jake Sullivan, the man who, with Nuland and with Blinken, triggered this whole war by poking and poking and poking the bear until it finally took a swipe. All right, folks. I could go on, but I hope you get the picture. Contact your congressman, contact your senator, and say enough of this nonsense. As Kennedy said, if we go to nuclear war, the fruits of the victor will be spoils in his mouth. Cuban Missile Crisis, October 1962. All right, that's my opinion. Now let's bring in an expert. Now let's bring in a real expert, okay? This gentleman, Don. Hey, Don, how you doing? Hold on a second. I want to do a little setup here. This gentleman, I'm just going to read from just partially here, okay? He's authored 15 books. Former Navy JAG officer, all right? 15 best-selling books. And his probably best known, and I think this is important because it really tells who you are, a man of conscience, good fellow Christian. His book, on Lieutenant Clint Lawrence, who was convicted because he killed an enemy in combat in Afghanistan. Now think of that. You're at war, you kill the enemy, and our under, I guess it was under Obama, 2011. Is that right, Don?
It was indeed. Absolutely.
Yeah. So Obama has him tried and imprisoned. Don wrote a book. He went to bat for the guy. Book 2019, Travesty of Justice, the shocking prosecution of Lieutenant Clint Lawrence. And a month later, Donald Trump pardoned the soldier, the warrior. So thank you for doing that, Don. And thank you for joining us. It's fantastic. I've been looking forward to this.
Carter, and I can't take sole credit for that. It was the president who pardoned Clint Lawrence. I was one of 4 former JAG officers on his defense team, and Pete Hegseth, who's going to be our next Secretary of Defense, worked hand in hand with us and hand in hand with me. So it was a team effort. But Clint was one of a number of our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines who became subjected to Obama's suicidal rules of engagement. His team got into a firefight with, actually, they were approached at a high speed by 3 Afghan riders, 2 who turned out to be Taliban bomb makers. We discovered that from later forensic evidence and DNA evidence, and the Obama administration still would not let him go. They prosecuted me at 20 years. They got him 20 years for murder, threatened to prosecute his men if they didn't turn against him. And he had been in prison nearly 7 years. On the night in November of 2019 that the president finally pardoned him, he walked out of there as one of the happiest days of my life. So I appreciate you bringing that up, but it showed President Trump's courage. I know for a fact Milley tried to talk him out of it. The former Secretary of Defense, Mark Esper, tried to talk the president out of it. The president is his own man, and God bless him. And God bless you for the great work you're doing here, Carter.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that, Don. Thank you. You know, folks, I follow Don on Facebook, and you should too. It's some of the best material you're ever going to see. But I want to go to ask you about Milley in a second. Before we do, he posted this today, which I thought was hilarious. The red for Christmas, Merry Christmas, and the idiots on the left in the blue, Happy Holidays.
It's amazing, isn't it? When you look at those county by county, county by county, maps of who's red and who's not. We're a red country, and I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead. That map right there shows, Carter, the brilliance of our founding fathers with the Electoral College, because the Electoral College that Tim Walz and Democrats try to attack and destroy is one of the greatest checks and balances in the United States Constitution, which is full of checks and balances. If it weren't for the Electoral College, our founders knew that corruption, is a cesspool in these large blue areas. They knew that back in 1787, and that map shows their brilliance. Of course, the president won a popular vote as well, but God bless those guys. We got a lot of good things for this year.
Don, I often think when people say to me, well, you should go with the popular vote, I tell them, well, let me ask you a question. Do you really want to have your presidential elections determined by Larry David in California and Woody Allen in New York? Right. I don't think so. These people are kooks, and they, to me, are representative of the majority vote in California. Larry David, I think he's hilarious. I think Woody Allen's one of the funniest people in the face of, but I don't want him choosing my president. And that's why we have to have protections against states as big as New York and California. Am I right? Am I right?
Betcha. And you betcha. And it goes back to a fundamental premise in Article 4, Section 4. This Constitution gives to the states a Republican form of government. It was James Madison, the principal architect of the Constitution and of the Bill of Rights, who said that a democracy is the most vile form of government. And of course, Benjamin Franklin said democracy is like two wolves and a sheep meeting at high noon and voting on what they're going to have for lunch. So we are a constitutional republic. We're not a democracy, and it just gets under my nerves. Even when our own Republican senators and Fox News guys are democracy. You can throw democracy in the trash can. We are a constitutional republic, which is based upon checks and balances. If you want to see what a true democracy looks like, you go back to the 2020 George Floyd riots. That is what a true democracy looks like. Every democracy eats itself. The founders hated democracies, and the Electoral College is part of the series of checks and balances. See, a constitutional republic is built on checks and balances designed to prevent the usurpation of excessive governmental power. We got to go back to know who we are and what we're about if we're going to move forward and make
Don,
this work.
if we had a democracy, people like my little fat Italian mother, right? We'd still be digging ditches, right? We said her father came here as a ditch digger, and democracy would say, yeah, we like the Italians in their place, digging ditches and making spaghetti. That's it.
There would never have been a civil rights movement if this nation were not a constitutional republic. Just remember that, because otherwise you could vote away people's civil rights. And that's what we've got to understand. The Constitution does have democratic elements in that our members of Congress, that is, have the House of Representatives, are elected. But originally under the Constitution, not even U.S. senators were elected publicly. So the idea is to check power against, what we need is less government. Like President Reagan said, the government that governs least is the government that governs best. And I think he borrowed that from Jefferson. That's what the Constitution is designed to do. We have limited enumerated powers in Article 1, Section 8. But above and beyond that, at every turn, you see checks and balances at multiple levels under our great Constitution. I think we got to get back to that. You mentioned off air, I'd run for Congress, and we were having a debate one night, and I was sitting beside one of my opponents who was a member of the North Carolina General Assembly, and I looked at him and said, John, if you really want to do something for this state that will be larger than life, then you should require that the United States Constitution be taught in North Carolina public schools every year, from kindergarten all the way through 12th grade, from an original intent standpoint. We don't know what we are, and we just, we're listening. You mentioned the dying legacy media. Too many people listen to that garbage and we've not been taught to think critically in this nation. We got to get back to that. We got to get back to our roots. Back to the future is where it's at.
Back to the future is where it's at. And I want to go back to something you said earlier. And look, this is going to be like a rapid fire interview. It's just you and me talking. And I think you're one of the most brilliant analysts I've ever seen. A historian, an author. You're on top of what's going on around us. And so I just want to throw some thoughts at you. Some of them are just my thoughts, which you might say, yeah, you really are crazy as a loon. But here's my thought. You mentioned Milley, okay?
Right.
Honest to God, I really believe he was demented. I don't know whether he was diabolical, but I think he was demented. That putting tampons in the men's barracks is a little sicko to me, okay? Little sicko. Being fat as a pig when you're supposed to be ordering around men who have to be in shape, I don't think that's appropriate. And then what he did on January 6th, he convinced himself that Donald Trump was a Nazi. So he denied the National Guard being moved in. He denied the military assistance. Was this man just crazy as a loon?
Well, yes, he was. He usurped his authority, called the Chinese. We're not going to do anything regardless of what the president says. Now, listen, from a large perspective, remember this. 12 out of the last 16 years, we've had Democrats at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. And from the 8 years of Obama and to the 4 years of Biden, these Democrats have put lunatic admirals and generals in charge of the Pentagon. These are political admirals and generals who are willing to buy into the woke garbage that these foolish administrations have pushed. Milley is an absolute product of that. The day that they take the White House in January of 2020, they order a 6-week stand down looking for white nationalists or whatever within our military. In other words, accusing our own military of racism. Then they force this woke junk inside the military. I can tell you, and I won't give the name of the unit, but I know a unit. Right now, I'm telling you, after October 7, 4 deployed in Europe, a paratrooper unit, and orders were put out, contingency orders to move that unit into first the Golan Heights in case Hezbollah came down. Then the orders changed, contingency orders to move them from Cyprus and into Lebanon. And, if necessary, several weeks after that, this Biden Pentagon dropped, now get this, a dude wearing a woman's dress and high heels into the middle of that combat unit. This is the type of garbage and junk that these Biden and Obama generals and admirals have foisted on us. Listen, the United States Army, Navy, and Marine Corps all formed in 1775, are older than the Republic itself. They predate the U.S. Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. They are our most cherished governmental institution in my perspective. I'm a Navy guy. But the leftists have tried to destroy them from within. And General Milley is absolutely emblematic of that assault on the inside. As I mentioned earlier, he fought President Trump tooth and nail against their Lawrence pardon. Clinton Lawrence is an American soldier. They got into a firefight in the most kinetic, dangerous area of Afghanistan, Kandahar province, wanted to keep an American soldier in jail. And by the way, President Trump, if you happen to listen to this, we still have several guys who are at Leavenworth, including Bob Bales, who was convicted in the so-called Kandahar massacre, has been serving years and years after the way this fool Biden withdrew from Afghanistan and left billions of equipment for the enemy, got 13 of our Americans killed in his foolish pullout with these Afghans trying to hang on to these C-5s. Mr. President, you ought to pardon every American still at Leavenworth and release them because of what these Democrats have done. These wars, and you were right from the beginning, Mr. President. Iraq, listen, Saddam Hussein wasn't involved in any weapons of mass destruction against the United States, so you couldn't find any anyway. You were right from the beginning. Let our service members go. They served enough. Whether they're guilty or not guilty, they served enough. That is the only way to bring some justice, to begin to bring some justice from the disastrous withdrawal that we had in Afghanistan. I don't know how I got off on that, Carter, but it's just been burning with me for a while.
Well, I'm glad you did, because you're a guy who can make a difference. Now, what about a guy who right now is being persecuted, in part because of his military service? So, and I'm sure you know him. I have trouble with his name. Is it Hegseth?
Hegseth, yeah, right.
Hegseth, the next Secretary of Defense, hopefully. So they are saying he is a white supremacist because he has the Jerusalem cross tattooed on him. I pointed out last episode of Coffee with the Carter Men, it was 1099 that King Godfrey designed the cross when he took Jerusalem. There were no African Americans in Jerusalem at the time, so it was certainly not a white supremacist symbol. But in the military, Hegseth got demoted or pulled from duty, I think, in one of his assignments because under Austin he was accused of being a white supremacist.
Well, I mean, look, Lloyd Austin is the most foolish excuse of a chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff this nation has ever had. Now, listen, I know Pete Hegseth. He worked very closely. I've worked closely with him on a couple of high-profile cases. In fact, you were kind enough to mention my book earlier. I got a text from Pete just about 2 weeks before he was nominated, thank you, saying, "Hey, this looks good, Don. I'm going to order a copy of it and read it." I sent him a congratulatory note. Did not hear back from him, Pete. If you're listening, I know you got more important things to do. I may never hear from the guy again, but I've worked with him closely. And I'm going to tell you, Pete Hegseth, once confirmed, has the potential to be the greatest Secretary of Defense this nation has ever had. Now, why do I say that? You go back to the very last speech President Eisenhower made to the nation, warning against the military-industrial complex. We've had SecDefs. We've had chairman of the Joint Chiefs, all who are buying into this military-industrial thing. That you mentioned Ukraine earlier. They want to escalate in this foolish Ukrainian war. They want to put our troops on the ground. Pete Hegseth, however, is a warrior's warrior. His heart is the heart of those who fought and died and bled for this nation. And he's going to put the troops first. And the reason they're trying to throw this garbage at him is because just like President Trump is such a threat to the deep state, he is a threat to the deep state at the Pentagon. He will turn everything they have institutionalized and believed in upside down and upside on its heels. Now, that's not to say that he won't stand for the strongest military in the world. Now, President Reagan had a mantra, peace through strength. And his mantra is our military should be so strong that no other adversary should ever dare test its strength. But that doesn't mean we need to be the policeman of the world. It's a whole different type thing. And Pete Hegseth is going to push again, for blood and guts type of training. You're not going to have a bunch of compromised training for, women. You don't lower the standards of our special forces to accommodate political correctness. Hegseth understands that that's going to change. I read an article the other day that some Air Force father at the Air Force Academy was forced to to check the description of his relationship to the cadet as biological, biological progenitor of something like this.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
He's going to change that crap. That they are trying to destroy the military from within. President Trump, I saw the other day, he said, we're not going to do this transgender stuff in the military. Look, I feel for anybody that has a psychological condition, okay? But you don't put psychological problems in the middle of our combat forces. That's going to come to an end. And someone wrote an article criticizing Pete for that, saying, well, we already have shortages in recruiting. Well, why do you think we have shortages in recruiting? It's because of the woke crap they forced it on the military. It just burns me up, Carter. It really does.
And you're right to have it burn you up. You have a situation with Austin, okay? Secretary of Defense, who came from Raytheon, a munitions maker, the munitions maker who makes the ATACMS and makes billions and billions and billions of dollars a year off of them. And does anybody really believe that Austin doesn't have loyalty to Raytheon, the munitions maker?
Right.
Your comment.
I didn't apologize. I didn't mean to talk over you. Where do you think? Which board of directors do you think Lloyd Austin is going to land on just as soon as his time as SecDef ends on January 20th, 2025? Probably Raytheon. I mean, look at Nikki. She was. They call her Governor Boeing in South Carolina. I'm licensed. I practice in South Carolina. I live in the Charlotte area, but still practice down there. You call her Governor Boeing down there. I mean, and she's still trying to remain relevant with all her asinine comments. At least DeSantis, when he took a licking in the rear end, at least he went back and became an effective governor and isn't running his mouth. But listen, Austin, Nikki Haley, they're part of the very military industrial complex. Now, let me just say, when Eisenhower warned us, it isn't just industrial, it's military industrial. So it's these generals getting in bed with these defense contractors, and they'll take their stars on their collars, and they'll become the advocate for never-ending wars. And that's exactly what we're seeing. And you just pointed out with those missiles, Raytheon makes the missiles. I would bet the barn that's where he winds up, probably back on the board at Raytheon just as soon as he steps down from the Pentagon. That'd be my guess.
Of course, I'm making a fortune. A lot of people forget, and I know you remember this, Harry Truman, when he went into the Senate, he became famous because he's the one who chaired the hearings into the weaponry that the obscene profits that the munitions makers were making off weaponry for World War I. He essentially said they triggered the war. They triggered our entry into the war so they could make money. So, and Truman, like him or not, pretty straightforward little guy. And I think we need that kind of a senator again, who's going to open some hearings and say, what the hell is going on with this catering to the munitions makers?
Absolutely. And listen, you look at Ukraine, it's not in the American orbit. And Bobby Kennedy's right. And I remember this just like yesterday, when the Iron Curtain fell, Jim Baker told Gorbachev, hey, we're not going to move NATO east of Germany. Okay, so now we're in Poland, we're in the Baltic states, but Ukraine, come on, Ukraine is historically and genetically and culturally, you can't. There's a border between Mother Russia and Ukraine, but that's about it. Their languages are almost identical. I mean, I can speak a little Russian. Ukraine is very, very similar to Russian, but they're first cousins. And you have not only advocacy of moving them into NATO, but now you're having U.S. missiles being fired in there, and Putin's responding with these hypersonic missiles, and both the Chinese and the Russians. Again, 12 out of the last 16 years under Democrat presidents, we've gotten way behind them on hypersonic missile technology and defense of hypersonic missile technology, while we focused on woke and all other types of crap simply to weaken the forces from the inside. So it is a very, very dangerous hair trigger situation that we're in right now, and it's being driven largely by the military industrial complex
and the mainstream media, if I may say that. New York Times today said that now Biden is considering giving nuclear weapons to Ukraine, or as he puts it, giving them back the weapons that we told him to get rid of. That's how far we've gone, Don.
Well, and Tucker Carlson raised the question, just within the last couple of days, are they intentionally trying to start World War III and drop it in President Trump's lap before they leave office? And that is a legitimate question. There's no geostrategic interest for the United States to be spending the money and the attention that it is on Ukraine. And by the way, when you look at Ukraine and Russia, you're not looking at two constitutional republics. And,
No.
and the Democrats and Republican rhinos and these military industrial proponents, they don't tell you that Zelensky himself is going to shut the Orthodox Church down in Ukraine, or that he was going to suspend elections. How you like just those two concepts alone? If a democracy. If you want to fall into their little category of what a democracy is, those certainly are not attributes of any democracy, and certainly not a constitutional republic. When you have a dictator who's going to shut a church down, and yet, not that Putin's a good guy, but it's not like the Zelensky walks on water either. So you were basically getting in bed with one dog full of fleas rather than the other dog full of fleas, and that's really what it boils down to. And we are risking thermonuclear war in the process. So
and let's not forget, Zelensky is in power because Victoria Nuland helped spearhead a overthrow of a coup against the elected government of Ukraine. In 2014, the Maidan coup overthrew an elected government and installed Zelensky's predecessors, who then groomed him, a porno comedian, to become president because they wanted an actor whose idea of caring for his people is 600,000 young Ukrainians dead, and his wife buying a $5 million Bugatti with U.S. taxpayer money. How sick is that, Don?
Then we have my fellow North Carolinians in the mountains tonight in tents, without heat, with the snow and freezing temperatures, and we're throwing our hard-earned money into a place like that. And your admonition earlier, and your encouragement to your viewers and listeners to call your congressman, you got to do it now. Get on the phone and do it now. It's the hardest time of the year to get Congress to act because half of them are home all the time. But you got to pull the money, guys. You got to pull the money before this full starts a war. Before
got to pull the money. Well, speaking of pulling the money, look, you're an astute political analyst. How'd you feel about little Mikey Johnson? And I know I'm cynical. You're thinking to yourself, does this guy like anybody? I do. I do. I like Ronald Reagan. But little Mikey Johnson promised us that he was not going to continue the war in Ukraine, funding it, and immediately pushed through another $68 billion. What do you think when that happened? What's the story with this guy?
Well, go figure. Matt Gaetz got into a lot of trouble, with his colleagues in the House for successfully getting Kevin McCarthy removed. But do you think we've got to step up from Kevin McCarthy? This guy, Johnson, is right in bed, it appears, with the whole military-industrial complex in terms of continuing to throw money at Ukraine through continuing resolutions. If I've been elected to the United States Congress, if I'm ever elected, I will never vote for continuing resolution. The Congress has a responsibility to get its budget in. Continuing resolution is just like giving a credit card to the deep state to do what it wants. And that's exactly what Mike Johnson is doing. We're not getting any type of bully pulpit opposition to the Ukraine war from the Speaker of the House. Now, why is that? We haven't really upgraded. The Republicans, Congresses have had a series of weak speakers. Newt was the last time we bounced a budget, and God bless him, he came in with a clear agenda with the contract with America. And when the Republicans took Bill Clinton to school in the 1994 midterms and beat the living socks off the Democrats, he came on board the last time we submitted the balanced budget. But since then, we've had one weak leader after the other. Johnson goes in and has a meeting inside the SCIF, and then next thing he comes out and he's all on board with Ukraine. And so tell me what happened when he goes, you know what I mean by SCIF, the security facility. I'm sure your viewers know as well, goes in with security facility, talks to deep state operatives, presumably CIA, comes back out He's all on board with funding Ukraine. So what is up with that? And you got to give Matt Gaetz credit. I mean, he was arguing against all that and made him a lot of enemies. But where is our Republican leadership? Where are our members of Congress? That is, the Constitution sets forth Congress in Article 1 as supposedly the principal, organ of government in a divided government. That Congress has advocated its responsibilities, and we just let this deep state apparatus get away with absolute murder. Mike Johnson needs to step up and he's to come back to his roots, and he needs to be out there arguing against what the president's doing, what Biden, I should say, is doing. I rarely use that phrase in connection with him, so forgive me, Lord. But what he's doing with these missiles right now, giving them the ability to trigger a war, where is our Republican leadership? Where is Mike Johnson? And Mr. Speaker, if you're there, you need to stand up now and you need to get tough. You've got another 60-some days before President Trump, resumes his rightful place. And right now, you're the highest elected Republican official in the United States. And you need to be standing up and put this on your shoulders and standing in the gap before President Trump can get there. So I don't know where he is. I share the same frustrations.
Well said. Well said. Mike Johnson. So in the House, we've got nothing. I'm going to say something. You can agree or disagree. One of my biggest disappointments is Jim Jordan. Jim Jordan, to me, has turned into another Kirk Gowdy. Talk, 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 talk. Where the hell's the action? What do you think?
Well, I share your frustration. What good is it to investigate if you don't bring the hammer down after you investigate? Investigation is nothing but talking. It's just nothing but an opportunity to get on Fox News. I've written this book, which you were kind of mentioning earlier, because there have been attacks against the United States Constitution with these political prosecutors. Will there be ramifications? Will there be legislation? I'm calling for rogue prosecutor law so that these Fannie Willises and Jack Smiths have to look over their shoulder if they bring a prosecution primarily for political purposes. Or will we just blab, 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 and blab some more? So Jordan does a good job with his hearings. He exposes a lot of stuff. But where is the hammer, Congressman? It's time to bring the hammer down. And in this transition, as we wait for the second term of the Trump presidency to go into effect, we've got to understand that now is not the time to take our foot off the pedal. We need to put the pedal to the metal. We need to bring the hammer down. And the Democrat Party, as it is, must be destroyed philosophically. They have turned into a bunch of English-speaking communists, and we got a bunch of fat and happy Republicans in the Congress that have gone along with it. We have to continue to speak out what you're doing. I admire you for it and always have, Carter. But now is not the time to get fat and happy. Now is the time to actually go to war and save this constitutional republic. And Congressman Jordan, bring the hammer. Stop talking and bring the hammer. We've got to have legislation to bring these people to bear.
Got to bring the hammer. Somebody's got to go to jail. Speaking of going to jail, you are now the expert. You're the expert on lawfare, what they've done to us. It has been a horror show. Let me be honest with you. I have been, as president of the Constitutional Rights PAC, I send out a daily email, and for 4 years now, I have just been absolutely talking the way you and I are talking now. Every night when I go to bed with my little Honduran wife, I warn her, Princess, there could be a knock on the door and I could be hauled away. And I'm dead serious about it, because that's where we are in America today. The FBI has to be dismantled as far as I'm concerned. Fire all of them. I don't want to hear this BS about, well, the agents are, it's Sean Hannity. 99% of the agents are really good people. Oh, bullshit. Okay, knock it off. Good people don't knock down the doors of pro-life people and drag them away in front of their kids. They don't shoot 300-pound fat men in wheelchairs in, I don't know, Idaho or Utah because they made a joke online. We need a total cleanup, and you're the authority on this lawfare. First of all, I want to ask you, is Jack Smith nothing but a two-bit huckster hitman? Is that all that guy is?
That is what he is. I had a op-ed published in the Federalist a couple of weeks ago on Jack Smith. He's trying to withdraw and dismiss his actions down in Florida, and part of the reason for that is because Judge Cannon, taking her cue from Justice Thomas in the U.S. v. Trump, correctly recognized that Jack Smith was illegally appointed unconstitutionally in violation of the Appointments Clause, Article 2, Section 2. the special counsel statute expired in 89. Excuse me, 99. It expired and was not renewed by the Congress, and that's why that case was dismissed. Jack Smith doesn't want the 11th Circuit to affirm Judge Cannon because, see, it's not just Jack Smith, but Robert Mueller, who was also unconstitutionally appointed in violation of the Appointments Clause. And under Robert Mueller, you've got a number of Americans such as Roger Stone, Paul Manafort, my friend General Flynn, Papadopoulos, and on and on and on, who were prosecuted only for one reason, and that's their association with Donald Trump, which is a violation of the First Amendment. Jack Smith should never practice law. And Congress, we have a Republican Congress now with a Republican president coming up. There is no excuse for not getting anything done. I saw the other day Mike Davis suggested the possibility of bringing criminal charges for conspiracy against rights against Letitia James and others. Yep. He's got a thought there. The U.S. Code makes it a crime to conspire to take someone's constitutional rights. These political prosecutions are a direct attack against the United States Constitution on multiple fronts. And these prosecutors have to be brought to bear for it. And Congress has got to pass rogue prosecutor laws to specifically provide that any prosecutor from here on in bringing a case primarily now for political purposes, not every case, but primarily conspiracy to fill in the blank, attacking someone for their speech, for their association, that prosecutor ought to have to face potential prosecution himself in the aftermath. Congress should pass rogue prosecutor laws, and so should every legislature in the United States, or else they will do it again. And it goes back to your point about Jim Jordan. I saw he was being interviewed by Dana Bash, and she was saying, "Oh no, is the president going to retaliate?" And Jordan was giving political answers. You dag straight. There ought to be investigations into every one of these prosecutors. And if there's a way to go after them, we should do it. And we should strengthen the law so that there is a deterrent to this type of garbage in the future. Because when they go after your lawyer, for example, they went after my friend Jack Smith and Sidney Powell and Rudy and others. Fannie Willis prosecuted them under RICO. Well, listen, they don't care about Sidney Powell or Jack Smith. They want to destroy the attorney-client privilege so they can get at Trump. That attorney-client privilege, you go in to see your lawyer, Carter, you have a right to expect that whatever you say to your lawyer is going to be kept confidential, and that your lawyer is not going to be turned into a witness against you. That time-honored attorney-client privilege is based on two constitutional principles. One, the Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination, and two, the Sixth Amendment right to effective assistance of counsel. These are constitutional attacks, and that's why these prosecutors are criminals, if you ask me, because they're trying to destroy the very Bill of Rights on which our protections are built under the Constitution. So I didn't mean to preach a sermon on that, but something's going to be done.
Well, you know what? We need a sermon on it. And I'm going to say something. You're a lawyer. You are an established lawyer, a successful lawyer, a highly respected lawyer. My opinion as a layman is that the RICO law is one of the most vile, unconstitutional laws in the history of this country. It was, first of all, it was passed just to get folks like that, Dagos. All right. That's all it was passed for. That's all it was passed. And it is, if Carter knows Don, Carter can be arrested for conspiracy, racketeering. Well, why is that? Well, because he knows Don, but we're also arresting Don because he knows Carter. It's a tautology. What do you think?
I agree with you. And so if you go back and you look at Steve Bannon, then Steve Bannon was prosecuted because of his association with Trump. Peter Navarro, it was their association with Trump. When you look at every prosecution under Mueller, their association with Trump is what led to that. So your point on RICO, the right to freedom of association, the Supreme Court has held is recognized under the First Amendment. RICO violates that. You should be able to associate, and you can, with whoever you want. Now you can't. You and I can't associate together and agree that we're going to go commit a crime. Rob a bank. You get the bullets, I get the gun, and we'll meet at 3:00 in front of whatever bank it is. We can't do that. Right. But that's not what RICO. That's not the way RICO is being treated. And the law itself, the way it's drafted, is constitutionally problematic because it allows for prosecution based upon association. And that's where you start with it. And I agree. And I hope I hope that there are constitutional attacks made against it in Georgia. It's very, very clear that Fannie Willis's case is going to get wiped out. I worry about the peripheral folks who have been, drug in there. Look, all the president did was call Raffensperger and said, "What's going on down there?" And if you know what I know about Georgia. I mean, that election was stolen in Fulton and DeKalb counties, and it was stolen from unverified ballots coming in from here, there, and everywhere that should have been disqualified, which would have greatly exceeded the 14,000 or so vote gap that they reported in 2020. President's got it right as the chief executive to ensure that there is integrity in national elections, whether he is or is not the beneficiary. And they take RICO and turn it on its head. It should be stricken along with the Espionage Act and a bunch of other acts that are blatantly unconstitutional. But it's going to take a judge with a set of what to do it, and a Supreme Court that's willing to go along with that. And the Georgia legislature could take care of it right now. There's an example. You've got Republican government, Republican legislature. What are you going to let it stand for? What good are our Republicans? We're going to let this stuff stand.
If they don't, it's saying Republicans taking a stand, and we're almost out of time. I really want you to stay around for predictions, because I have a feeling, talking to you is wonderful, because I give my opinions and a lot of people say this guy is way out, but you back them up with facts. And I just love it. I just love it. I mean, you got that lawyer's mind, and it's outstanding. Let me ask you this. How fearful are you of the cabal in the Senate, which is so determined to cut Trump to pieces? McConnell, Murkowski, Collins, the person that replaced Romney out, the Republican from Utah. Right? What'd you say? And Thune. How fearful are you of these people? You remember when the first time Trump went in, we know that on the Thursday following him moving into the White House, McConnell and Ryan went in and told him, "You appoint who we want, or we're going to scuttle every piece of legislation you want." Okay, we know that. Do you think Thune, McConnell, Collins, Murkowski, and there are three others whose names don't come to mind, are we looking at the same kind of orchestrated cabal this time around?
You can throw John Cornyn from Texas in on top of that, and a couple of others.
Yeah.
I am concerned about that. I think McConnell may, McConnell stepping down as majority leader is like Nancy Pelosi stepping down as speaker. Everybody knows she's still pulling the strings in the House, and my concern is you've got that in the Senate as well. Now, and I discussed this in my book. McConnell is in bed with the Communist Chinese. I mean, his wife's shipping company, 2/3 of their shipments go straight to Communist China. So yes, I'm concerned about all that. Now, I'm also concerned about 2 years from now, when the Democrats are going to come hard, and some of them have gone in the hole for a time being because the lights come out. When the sun goes down a little bit, they'll be right back out of their holes just like a rattlesnake. And I'm concerned about they're going to make an all-out effort to recapture the Senate in 2026. Because we're going to have a number of seats that are up, including one in North Carolina with our Rhino friend, Mr. Tillis here. So I'm concerned about all that. Now, the people have spoken. We should have, we're going to have stronger and braver voices in the Senate opposing them. But at the end of the day, when, they've already torpedoed Matt Gaetz before he got out of and look, Matt, Matt, he's got a personality on him, no doubt about that. But usually he's right on the issues. His personality's made some enemies, but they don't like that. Matter of fact, the Gaetz nomination, and I think Bondi is going to be just as effective, but the Gaetz nomination, I think, was intentional from the president to send shivers down the spine of the deep state and DOJ. I agree with you. It ought to be cleaned out and even shut down if necessary. That's how corrupt it's gotten. But I am concerned about this cabal at the top of the Senate. I'm concerned about McConnell continuing to want to pull strings, much like Pelosi has. We're going to see how it plays out. We're going to really see how it plays out when these nominees are put before them for confirmation. And that's when we will know where the rubber meets the road. But I do have that concern.
Excellent. Thank you. We always close on going into the prediction segment. All right. And if you can stay around, I already know you and I are going to differ on a prediction, but if you can stay around, we're going to move into the prediction segment now. Gary and Sam, you guys ready? This is one where we really stick our necks out, Don. And I'm going to start. I'm going to start because you brought up her name. I got to be honest with you. My prediction is that Trump just held the snake to his chest when he decided to appoint Pam Bondi. And I want to tell you why, and I'll make it brief because we don't have much time left. That woman is going to be another Jeff Sessions because she cares nothing about her own political future. Why do I say that? She single-handedly caused the Trayvon Martin tragedy. She is the one who, after Trayvon Martin, after George Zimmerman had been freed, after they had declared him innocent, after they said it was purely self-defense, she stepped in for political reasons and said, oh no, I'm going to fire the district attorney who said that he was acting in self-defense, bring in a friend that I know will convict him in another county. And she was chummy with Mr. Crump, who is the one who made a fortune off the thing and supported her politically. My prediction is Trump just put the snake to his chest. There we go.
Let me just say this. You bring up some points that I had not considered. And I hope that you're not right about that. But I've gotten to the point anymore, Carter, that absolutely nothing surprises me.
Yeah.
This Crump guy, we know who he is. The whole Trayvon Martin thing should never, have been prosecuted. But we went through this prosecution anyway, and it caused a lot of turmoil. And so I had not thought about some of the points that you brought up about her. This is a number of years ago this happens. Hopefully she's seen the light. I wrote an op-ed a few weeks back, and you saw this about Dan Bishop, who was my guy initially as potential attorney general, because I know him so well, and I was kind of hoping he would fall in to line after the president, after Matt Gaetz withdrew. We've got Pam. Most likely she's going to be confirmed, I would guess.
Right.
And the last thing we need is another Jeff Sessions. That was the most disastrous appointment of the first Trump administration. So hope you're wrong, brother. I wouldn't be surprised if you're right. I'm going to try to remain cautiously optimistic as best I can, but I'll owe you one. I'll owe you a cup of coffee or something if you're right. I owe you that anyway for having me on, but we'll have to play that out and see how it goes.
Well, we owe you. Give us a prediction. Give us a prediction.
Prediction on. Tell me what you want me to predict, and you got it.
Predict Trump. Okay, predict what you think in the first 6 months is going to be the Trump move that arouses the greatest firestorm among the political hacks in Washington.
I think he's going to come in with wholesale firings in DOJ, and I think he's going to order investigations into political prosecutions. That is assuming we're not dealing with a war on January 20th that the United States is involved with, and I think it's going to set them ablaze.
Fantastic. Gary, what's your prediction this time?
J6 defendants. A lot of people ain't going to like that they all get released.
That too.
And that's the number one priority. I put that above anything else right now. Even the border. Deal with the border. Let Tom deal with the border. The moment Trump walks into that office, the first thing he should have is a desk full of papers. Every single person that's sitting in prison that shouldn't be there needs to be let out right now. And any prosecutor that threatened them with 20-year charges that you cannot threaten an individual with needs to be held accountable.
I've defended a couple of those guys, Gary. I'm with you on that, brother.
Amen. All right, Sam, lay it on us, buddy.
Well, after listening to Don and you and Don speak, I kind of agree that, this current Biden-Harris administration that's on the way out, they're trying to hand Trump like World War III on a platter, So it's not a good prediction, but if anything, I would imagine they're going to continue escalating so he can just start off terribly or like a strategy. Seems like they're going scorched earth right now. So
it's funny you guys all say that because 3 weeks before the election, I said they know she's not winning. and they're going out of their way to have the biggest handful of problems so that when he goes in, he can't get to the things people voted for. That was their goal. And I'm going back into October, early October, they started it. They started with conflicts with Ukraine, conflict in Gaza, like everything they started this way sooner. They knew she wasn't winning. It's not just a now thing. They've been at it. It's
I
just
think you nailed
heavily
it.
escalated now, thanks to Biden and his lackeys.
Yeah. they're
All
going
right,
all
buddy.
in.
You get the final word there, folks. Thank you very much for joining us with Coffee with the Carter Man. We will see you next week. Get out there, fight, fight, fight. Stay strong.